The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Today's guest and their company are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial. For those who don't know you, do you mind introducing yourself and telling me about you?
My name is Matt Loudermilk. I am co-owner of Cornerstone Custom Homes, and I've lived in Abilene since 1996 when I came here to finish my school at Hardin-Simmons, and married to Amy Loudermilk. We got married in 1999, so we'll be married 27 years in June. Wow. And I have 4 kids that we raised here in Abilene. Braxton, Briley, Macy, Maddox. My 2 oldest, Braxton and Briley, both graduated from Tarleton, got, wildlife biology degree, fisheries biology degree, and then the twins, Macy and Maddox, they're sophomores at A&M, Texas A&M, one's getting a construction science degree, and my daughter's getting her kinesiology degree to be a physical therapist.
So, very nice.
Been an Abilene guy for, almost 20 years, 20 years now. So, yeah. Really, really love the town, really love the people. And, it's big enough to have stuff to do, yeah, but it still has a small town feel. Yeah. I'm not sure that's going to be the same the next,
sure.
next few years.
That might be slightly changing.
Yeah,
but it'll be a
slightly
long time
changing
before I think we miss some of that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just been here for a long time. And of course, Abilene was kind of always my second home. Both my parents graduated from ACC. That'll really date them. Okay. It was Abilene Christian College back then before it changed to ACU. So we'd always come back here. I grew up in Stephenville, and we'd always come back here for homecoming, sing song, that kind of thing. Nice. And I actually attended ACU for 1 semester, and then
just a whole semester then.
Just a whole semester. Had a little too much fun and not enough class time.
That'll do it.
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So you said that you are a home builder. What got you into home building?
Well, my dad had been a home builder, not full time. He always did it on the side. He built our personal homes. In the 14 years that we lived in Stephenville, we would build and move every couple of years. That's what builders do, is kind of their retirement. You build a house, you live in it for 2 or 3 years, then you sell it and you roll that capital gains into the next house and into the next house and the next house. And so I'd always been around it. A lot of my summer jobs, were me working for some of his subcontractors, being a framer. I've been an electrician, sheetrock, concrete work, roofing. I've done a little bit of almost everything. And so, I've always been around it. I didn't envision myself being a home builder when I was growing up. My dad always had a real job, I call it. And he did the building on the side, build a few homes, a couple of homes a year. And, plus our personal homes. And so I'd always been around it. Me and my brother grew up around it. Anytime we needed money for, bicycles that we wanted to buy, we would have to earn money for that. And so, my dad would make us do his make-ready cleans on houses that were, sure, or outside cleans, cleaning up all the trash and the cut lumber, the scrap lumber and bricks and shingles and all that, and wheelbarrow and a shovel, man. And then so that's how we'd been around it all of our lives. And and then when I finished school with my business finance degree, I was looking at getting into financial planning, that kind of thing. And wasn't having much luck getting in. And I was married, had 2 kids. Didn't want to leave Abilene. We really liked Abilene. My wife grew up here, since she was in junior high. And we had a really good church, Southwest Park Baptist Church, that we were heavily involved in. That's where we got married. And so we didn't want to leave. So I called my dad up and I said, hey, I saw a lot of building going on, especially out in Heritage Parks, north side of town. Yeah. And my dad had built a few houses in there, and him and my mom were living in Stephenville at the time, back in Stephenville, and so I called him up and said, "Hey, I think I want to build houses," and he goes, "Okay," and so we went to a bank. He went with me, and of course he had, you know, in the late '90s, early 2000s, he'd built some houses here in Abilene when they were living here, and so we kind of called up all of his old subcontractors and went to a bank, and he co-signed on a note with me, and he gave me a 8x10 sheet of paper with a floor plan on it and some pictures of the house. One of, you know, it was a floor plan of one of his houses that he had built in Stephenville, and I think it was like 1,500 square feet, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and all I had as an elevation was a picture of front of the, you know, of the house that he had taken, and that's how I got my first start.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, I was kind of thrown to the wolves. You know, my parents didn't live here for, you know, my dad to be able to, you know, look over my shoulder and help me. I mean, I'd call him for advice and things like that, but
Sure.
I'd been around it long enough and seen, you know, how things went on job sites to kind of have an idea, but, you know, there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And
A lot of mistakes you have
a
to
lot
make
of
yourself.
mistakes you have to make yourself to you know, to get where I'm at now. And I made plenty of them, but, you know, I think that was the best thing for me, was just kind of being thrown to the wolves and doing it myself. And, you know, had some good mentors along the way, you know, like Gene Lantrip, that would help me out when I needed. Kenneth Musgrave was a big mentor. You know, I know he's, you know, he was a lot of people know him as a commercial builder, but, you know, they did build houses at one time, you know, early on in his career, and you know, he gave me advice and pointers when I needed it, and helped me with some lots, you know, because he was the developer of Heritage Park, so, you know, I had a good relationship with him, buying lots from him, and you know, so he helped me out along the way. You know, of course, my biggest help was my dad, because he'd been doing it for a long time. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I got my start.
Very nice. So, how did you connect with Tim then?
So that's kind of a funny story. You know, that was definitely a God story. I say that all the time. You know, it's the company's been Cornerstone Custom Homes, you know, the whole time since I started, because I felt God led me into it. You know, He shut all the doors for financial planning and, you know, anything else, and He really opened the doors for, you know, for me to be in the building business. So that's kind of why I wanted to name my company, you know, Cornerstone, and have that, you know, because I had that firm foundation of faith, and so I've been building for about 4 or 5 years. Wasn't making a lot of money at it. It was taking me too long to build. I was paying my subs too much. You know, the interest on, you know, on my interim loans was killing me, because it was taking me too long to build houses, and I was paying, you know, my realtors too much, and so I was starting to, you know, and then we were getting close to 2008. It was 2008 when the market really crashed, when the housing bubble busted in 2008. You know, luckily Abilene wasn't hit quite as hard as a lot of other places.
Sure.
You know, I visited some family in Georgia, and there were some neighborhoods that we went through there that just, you know, empty streets that had completely shut down, half-built houses, you know. So we were pretty lucky in that respect, but, you know, I was struggling, and I was, you know, thinking, man, I'm gonna have to go get a job, you know, and because by this time I had 4 kids, you know, 2 small twins, and you know, and plus the older boys, and so I was really struggling, and, you know, wondering, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I knew who Tim was through mutual friends, and he had just sold his house. Well, we had just sold our house that we were living in, and we had moved into one of my spec houses that I hadn't sold yet, and out there in Heritage Parks. And I had a spec house right next door that I hadn't sold. It was under a contingency contract, and Tim had sold his house to an investor, and he had 2 weeks to get out.
Oh, wow.
And And so he had gone to another builder that had a couple of houses out there that his first wife at the time had looked at and really liked. And so he called that builder up and said, "Hey, I'd like to, buy this house." He goes, "Sorry, man, I just put it under contract this morning." So Tim called a mutual friend of ours and said, "Hey, do you know of any other, builders or houses?" And he said, "Well, call Matt, And he said, "Matt might have a house out there." So I get a call from Tim, and I knew who he was. He and his dad had a auto mechanic shop, Ellis Automotive,
Oh, okay.
over by Red Lobster for years.
Yeah.
Really well known, really honest mechanics.
Right.
And a lot of people trusted in to fix their cars, and so I knew him through there. And our kids had kind of gone to Taylor Elementary together. Their youngest daughter and my oldest son were same age, so we knew who they were, and they were living in Heritage Park, same as we were. And so he called me up and was like, "Hey, do you have any houses for sale?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I got this one right here next door that's under contingency contract, but doesn't look like it's going to happen." So, talked to my realtor. We ended up selling it, and selling it to Tim and Krista, and so we became neighbors. And we would sit out on the driveway in the evenings. We became friends through that process, and we would, sit out in the driveway in the evening, and of course, Tim's blind, of course. So he always had this neat trick because he was a mechanic for, so long. He could listen to a car drive by and tell me what year, make, and model it was just by hearing it,
Wow.
So we'd sit out in the driveway in our lawn chairs, and he was flipping houses with a childhood friend of his, and he really enjoyed that. He didn't want to be a mechanic anymore. And so there was an empty lot across the street that another builder had and wasn't doing anything with. And we sat there and looked at it every evening going, "Hey, maybe we could do this. Could we do it better, faster, cheaper? What could we do?" And, so we talk. And then, finally one day we were like, let's give it a shot, And so, we called the builder and said, "Hey, would you be willing to give up this lot?" And he said, "Sure, I'll sell it to you." So we bought it from him. We put our business plan in action and built it together, and sold it pretty quickly. And we were like, "Okay, so we can do this,"
Yeah.
And of course, everybody thought we were crazy. My wife Amy thought we were crazy when I told her I was going to go partners.
Yeah.
My dad thought I was crazy. His dad thought he was crazy. Everybody thought we were crazy, but it just felt like God opened doors and shut doors to put us together.
Yeah.
And so, and Tim's a very, type A type personality, go. And I'm kind of more of the laid back, I always say he's the bad cop, I'm the good cop.
Right.
So it kind of works for us. And, but yeah, I mean, everybody thought we were crazy. And so we just said, let's do it. And so we, that's how we got our start, was as being partners. And here we are, 17 years later.
So what did the early days look like outside of that first build? Was it just kind of off to the races after that point, or was it still
after our first build? Yeah. No, I mean, it took us some time. We would build them just kind of here and there, one or two here and there. When you're young and you don't have a lot of experience, banks aren't going to just hand out money to you. They're going to say, "Well, we'll do one for you, see how you do. We'll do maybe two." So it was a struggle, but luckily we had my dad to kind of help us once he got to know Tim and everything. And so when Kenneth Musgrave put in the last street, Bunker Hill, in Heritage Parks, we went in and bought most of the lots on that street, and we just started, building them right down the line. And we did a lot of the work ourselves. Not I don't say not a lot of the work, but some of the work. We did our own make ready cleans. Tim and I'd get over there and scrubbing bathtubs, cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, sweeping, dusting, cleaning windows. We did our own lockouts. Putting on the doorknobs and the bath accessories, and Tim would walk around and check, check the door casing. If the gap was too big, he would, oh no, that's not good. We got to, we got to fix that. We need to fix that. So we get guys back, painter back to fix that. We held our own open houses. We didn't use realtors. We couldn't afford to pay commissions, so we would kind of piggyback off of other builders' open houses. If we saw an open house sign go up, we had some of our own open house signs made, and we'd stick those in the yard. And me and Tim would sit in the house, just him and I, on a Sunday from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And hoped people would come in, and that's how we sold a lot of our houses. Just directly, without a realtor, not having to pay a commission, and that's kind of how we got the start. And so it was a lot of work in the beginning. It still is, but a lot of work, a lot of hard work.
How long would you say until you were able to stop having to do as much of the physical part of it yourself? Or
it was probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, once we really kind of got things going, and banks were willing to let us do some more spec houses. We picked up some customs, and so it was probably 2 or 3 years after we kind of got our first start that we kind of let other people do that, because our time was better spent meeting with clients,
Sure.
being out, checking job sites, making sure the guys are doing what they're doing, and being where they're supposed to be and doing what they're supposed to be doing, instead of out there with a shovel and my time. Our time is worth more meeting with clients and than the little bit of money it would save us to do our own cleanup.
Right.
Or our own lockout.
Right, no, completely. Yeah, you definitely want your time to grow to be a little bit too expensive for that,
Right.
an opportunity for that.
Yes.
Yeah, so everyone thought you were crazy for having a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because we hadn't known each other that long. I mean, we kind of had mutual friends. We'd only been neighbors for just a few months, and so it was just like his I'm sure his dad had visions of him taking over the mechanic shop, and of course it's crazy that he was a blind auto mechanic, but he was very good at it.
Yeah.
And Tim's a very amazing guy, being able to do some of the stuff he does, being blind. And so but he just he enjoyed building houses, and so it was just kind of natural for us. I mean, we have our back and forth, our arguments of how things should run, how things should be, but we always, in the end, we talk it out, and we move forward, and so it's been a really good blessing for all these years of doing it together.
How many years now?
Oh gosh, we started in 2009, so we're going on 15, 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
yeah.
Longer than a lot of marriages.
Yes, yes.
Sadly, yeah.
I joke about it that Tim is like my second wife.
Sure.
Because when you're a business partner, it's you spend a lot of time together. You have to talk a lot. You have to make a lot of decisions together, just like any other marriage.
Yeah.
And so yeah. He's like my second wife.
So why do you think a lot of those partnerships don't typically last, even if it does have a firmer foundation than maybe you guys had?
Well, because Tim and I are so different, because he is that type A personality, that, black and white, go, go, go. He's softened up in his old age a little bit. Sure. But I think that's what made us work, is that I'm kind of the laid back, easygoing. When he gets amped up and trying to push, I can kind of, hey, let's slow down. Let's talk about this. Let's pray about this. Let's think about this, before we make a rash decision. And so I think that has really helped us, and just the fact that we can talk things through. We may not always agree,
Yeah.
but we've always been able to talk things out and make a good decision and move on, and not have that animosity or that leaving things on bad terms. I think that's where a lot of partners can go sideways, is when they can't talk things out. They can't work together and try to figure things out and move forward.
Yeah.
So leave some bad feelings there, and so it just, you get too much of that friction, and then it just kind of explodes and goes to pieces.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So what were some of the bigger hurdles when you got started, or if you had kind of like a rough spot over the years?
Well, building is so cyclical. You have really good years and you can have some really bad years. And that's probably the toughest thing in building is can you build enough houses, make enough money to sock away, and to when the market gets bad, you can survive those. You can survive those bad years. Some years they're just kind of not so bad, and they're a little shorter term, slow points in the market where housing is kind of slows down. And then there's some that 2008 was pretty bad, for a lot of people across the country. And that was why my dad never did it full time, because he had seen a lot of his builder friends go out of business in the bad times.
Gotcha.
Because one thing he always told me was the interim note is not your money. They may be letting you borrow it, but the interim note is for the house. It's not for you to use to go on vacation, or to rob Peter to pay Paul, over here on this house, and so that's something we've always made sure we do, is we don't dip into that money, for that interim construction note money for personal use. I mean, that I've seen a lot of builders get in trouble doing that.
Yeah.
I want to go on a vacation. I'm going to use $5,000, of a construction note to take a vacation, and I'll get it back. I'll reimburse it when I sell the house. Well,
Yeah. It doesn't always work.
Doesn't always work.
Probably doesn't usually.
No. Most times not.
So you said it was kind of about 2 to 3 years before you were starting to feel a little bit more like you guys were in a groove. When was that first, like, okay, I think we made it kind of moment? You guys have been in business a long time. You've been doing it at a high level for a long time.
Well, I feel like it wasn't really like a, bang, we've made it type moment. It's kind of gradual. When you're competing against guys like Gene Lantrip and other builders around town that have been around for a while, that have been doing it for a long time, when you kind of get mentioned in the same breath as those guys, that's when you're like, oh, okay. The first couple of years, when I say, 2 or 3 years, we felt like we were kind of on our way. Yeah, we were, but we weren't at the level yet where I feel like we are now. Most of our reputation has come from just making clients happy, building good quality homes, and just helping build up the community and be a part of the community. And then our reputation is kind of taken off from there. Of, hey, here's if you're wanting to know who's a good builder in town, here's your top 3 guys, top 4 guys, top 5 guys, and being mentioned in the same breath as some of those top guys that have been around for a little while. That's kind of when you're like, oh, okay, we're kind of there now,
Yeah.
So yeah, that took a while. Really did. It really took a while. So, and we were kind of always known as the north side guys, because we built a lot of houses in heritage parks and on the north side. We still, I think we kind of really, our reputation grew a little bit more when we kind of took over Wiley Legacies over there by Wiley High School, and
Gotcha.
The guy that was developing that, had a couple of streets already in. It wasn't really going that well. We had heard through the grapevine that he was looking to sell. We didn't have the capital to purchase that on our own and do all the developing. So, we took it to the Musgraves, and they purchased it, and then we picked out what builders we wanted to go in there, and then that's kind of how Wiley Legacy's got. And so that was kind of when we kind of felt like we were there. Is that when we had our own little neighborhood, not necessarily our own little neighborhood, but we kind of had a hand in that. So that kind of gives you a little satisfaction that you had a hand in that neighborhood really taking off.
Do you foresee you guys ever wanting to get into the development part of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd like to. Yeah, I really would. And so, I mean, some builders that are around town that have been doing it for a long time, they've gotten into the development game, and they've been pretty successful at it. And so I think I'm hoping that we can get into that area here pretty soon. But yeah, that'll come at some point. Yeah, that's the next goal.
Very nice. Most stressful project you've worked on?
Ooh.
Or if you have a couple of them that come to mind when I say stressful.
Well, I will say I really don't have a specific project. The ones that scare me the most are anytime I'm building for my friends.
Really?
People that I know really well.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like anything that can go wrong on a project will go wrong when you're building for your friends.
Gotcha.
And those are the scariest projects because, building a house can be pretty contentious.
Right.
Between home builder and client. And, because clients have their ideas of how things should be and how they should go. Yeah. And us as builders who do it all day, every day. And I think that's where some, us included, we kind of forget that, hey, we do this all day, every day.
Right.
The client doesn't.
Yeah.
So we just go, well, how come you don't know this?
Sure.
So
yeah.
That's why I always tell my clients, there's, early on when we start meeting with them and everything, I tell them, there's no such thing as a stupid question when you're building a house because we do this all day, every day. You do not. Now, we have had some clients that, one of our best clients that we built for had built 9 previous houses with other builders. And, he was, he raved about how we were one of the best builders he'd ever worked with. But that's not always the case. So it's many of our clients we become friends with throughout the process. Yeah. And that's the way I like it. That's the way I want it. I feel like that's kind of part of my ministry is that, I'm going to build your house. I'm going to build it the right way. I'm going to build it honestly, ethically, because I've got to sleep at night, and, but I'm not going to get taken advantage of either.
Right.
So, but yeah, those are the hardest projects is when you're building for friends and just doesn't seem like anything goes right.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough.
Well, I'd been told pretty early on whenever we started looking into building, and it was like, hey, just so you know, this can end in divorce very quickly. It's like home renovation, like major home renovations and home building seem to be some of the most stressful things you can throw at a marriage. I can't imagine throwing that on a friendship can be much better. I was like, hey, I hope we're still friends after this. This great. Yeah, best case scenario.
Yeah, best case scenario, we're still friends.
We're still friends.
And I've told clients that before. Hey, this is going to test your marriage.
Yeah.
Because husband's going to want want things one way, and wife's going to want her things, and you've been through that process, so you know what I'm talking about.
Someone is going to say, I think we should go over on every one of these budgets.
That's where it really gets tough.
That's a great time. It really gets tough.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So basically the things that I was going to ask you about was how do things like material costs affect you? How do labor shortages, interest rates, 3 things that have all been difficult since COVID, I'm imagining. What has been kind of your experience? What have you noticed in our area?
Well, after COVID, it could have got really bad. I mean, it could have been really bad. I fully expected the housing market to take a hit after COVID, after everybody had been, quarantined for 6 months. And, but it actually was quite the opposite.
Really?
It exploded. And that really drove materials costs up. I mean, we went from, there's certain types of lumber that kind of give you cues to what the material market's doing price wise. Lumber is a commodity. It goes up and down all the time. And we were and OSB, the big 4x8 sheets of plywood that you see that go around the exterior of your house and on the roof, and that's a big indicator of that price of 2x4s, OSB. Those are kind of your two big indicators on pricing of what lumber's doing. And we went from paying like $8-9 a sheet for OSB to $50, $55, $60 a sheet. Now,
Wow.
if you're Joe Blow off the street walking into McCoy's, Abilene Lumber, Home Depot, Lowe's, wanting to buy a sheet of of OSB for some little project at your house, you were gonna pay $70 a sheet for OSB. But because builders buy in bulk and we buy so much, we get a little bit better pricing.
Sure.
So we were anywhere between $50 and $60 a sheet for OSB. So I had to have some very hard conversations with clients, that were building. And I mean, it was almost I don't want to say overnight, but it was a very quick, jump, skyrocket in lumber prices. I mean, I had to have some uncomfortable conversations with clients going, you're going to be $20,000 over on your lumber package, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that was, and it wasn't just here in Abilene. I mean, there were horror stories across the country of, builders in Dallas and Fort Worth, these big tract builders that build, master plan communities with swimming pools and schools and all kinds of, several swimming pools, golf courses around, master plan communities that, people were getting emails from the builder saying, hey, we're going to need another 90,000, 100K from you on your house, or we'll have to cancel the contract. And these people, they're 30 days out from buying their home. They've probably already sold their home that they're living in.
Yeah.
And it created some chaos.
Gosh.
Because the materials prices shot up so much, the builders couldn't just take a $90,000 to $100,000 hit on materials cost.
Especially when they most likely have 5 to 10 houses going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when they're building 200 houses a year, it's a big hit. So it did cause some chaos, but that's where the interest rate came down because inflation had skyrocketed for building materials and house costs, home costs, and so obviously the government trying to battle that inflation, interest rates went down, and that was good. Some people got in on some pretty good interest rates, but you were spending a lot more on your house.
Yeah.
So, but I don't. It'll be a long time if ever we see that kind of interest rate again.
Right.
So, and we kind of got spoiled on it for a couple of years there, 2-3% interest rate, and then now we're looking at it's gotten a little better over the last year and a half. Fed's cut the rates a couple of times, got them down. I was kind of expecting them to do it at the beginning of this this first quarter, but they decided to hold. We'll see what happens with everything going on in Middle East. But when things were when interest rates were 7-8%, it got pretty rough. It got pretty slow.
Yeah.
But historically, if that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. We got so spoiled on 2 and 3% interest rate for a couple of years. My first house that I bought when I got married, I was paying like 6 or 7% interest rate.
Sure.
you know, and um, and so, historically, 6 or 7% is not absolutely terrible,
Right.
you know. So,
It's been more that it's compounded with
yeah,
the added price of the house.
yes,
So I mean,
because
6 or 7% on a house that's 500K versus a
yeah, that was the
250K
hard part,
house.
was
Yeah.
that materials costs did come down some, but not a
Yeah.
lot.
Sure.
Lumber, copper, those materials that go in houses, oil that makes PVC pipe and all that, the byproducts of oil that make PVC pipe and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are all commodities. So when those go down, that's great. But, appliances, we had the whole chip shortage thing from China, and, some builders couldn't get appliances. We never really ran into that where we were waiting on appliances, but one of the biggest things that, because building got so crazy during that time, one of the things we did have to wait on was windows.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, there was such a big demand for home building that the window manufacturers got so overwhelmed because they can only make about 1,000 windows per week.
Okay.
Well, when you got all these builders just going gangbusters on building houses, they can't
Yeah.
keep up with the demand at a thousand windows a week.
Yeah.
And when most of those companies were working on skeleton crews because of COVID, people weren't coming back to work. And so it really put a, there were, I drive through neighborhoods where builders were sitting there with houses framed up and in the dry and ready to move on, but couldn't because you didn't have windows.
Yeah.
And, and one company would be, one window manufacturer would be, oh, we're 3 weeks out. Okay, great. Well, then once everybody finds out they're 3 weeks out, boom, everybody goes there. Well, then next thing you know, they're 6 to 8 weeks out on windows because they can't keep up with the demand. And then this window manufacturer over here is going, well, now we're back to 2 weeks out. Okay, so now everybody runs over here and so it was window merry-go-round to see who could, what company could get you the windows the fastest because houses were just sitting there without windows.
Wow.
And so, things like that were challenges during that time, but somehow, we got through them. I mean, we would get as far as we could until we absolutely had to have a windows before we kind of stopped progress. But usually we ordered them in enough time that the lead times, our houses weren't sitting near as long as some others.
Yeah.
So,
what is kind of your current thing that you guys are struggling with or the industry is struggling with?
well, like in Abilene specifically right now, it's kind of a housing shortage, mostly in the rental area. I mean, obviously because of all the AI stuff, the temporary workers, they're needing rental houses for all those temporary workers. Rental houses, obviously RV parks popping up everywhere. I talked to one AI guy that was looking at some of our houses. He's going to be one of the more permanent workers when the AI centers or data centers are done. So he's already starting to look at houses. But he said, they put in their own RV park, for the workers that are building, their specific AI data center. And so, I know the city of Abilene is working on, getting more infrastructure. We've got the B2 coming in at DICE, so they're trying to prepare for that. And I know the city and the mayor are working on getting those, getting more infrastructure and things, ready for all this, for all that. So it just, the only problem is it takes time.
Yeah.
You can't just throw up, put in more water pipes and sewer pipes and all the infrastructure you need to just throw up a bunch of houses and RV parks. So
not a lot of magic wands.
Not a lot of magic wands.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of it's been the case with so much growth going on. It feels like it's not uncommon to completely find a brand new builder sign that I've never heard of. What do you think gets people jumping into the market to compete with guys like you? And what gets them out?
Well, I think the easiest thing is because, you don't have to be a certified home builder in the state of Texas. You don't have to have a license or anything like that. Just almost anybody can do it. And so that makes it pretty easy to get in. But it's also the best part that we're not regulated like that. The state of Texas doesn't regulate. So, you have a lot more choice of home builders. You know,
I've just never heard anyone say, you know what's great about our state? You don't have to have a driver's license. It's really working out.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that there is some. I mean, you know there's some guys out there that probably shouldn't be doing it. And I mean, I'm on the Home Builder Association board, and I'm the vice president this year. And I know most of those guys that I serve on the board with and that are members, and they're all great guys and they're all great builders. But there are some people out there that get in it and that shouldn't be doing it. Maybe because they don't have the experience and the know-how of doing it. So, but that's the biggest thing is you got to know how the process works. And it's really hard to get started in the beginning. I had a little bit of help because my father was a home builder. We called some of his old subs up, subcontractors up. That's the hardest part, is finding good subcontractors. A lot of us builders share the same subcontractors. So there's not enough labor in this town to support all the builders. So a lot of us builders share the same subs. But when you have a home builder like us that builds 20, 30, 40 houses a year depending on the market, and Gene Lantrop, who builds 60, 70, 80 homes a year, Kyle Paul, if we're all sharing subs, there's not enough of them.
Yeah.
And so finding subs is the hard part. And so when a new guy comes in, decides, hey, I want to start building, he's got to go out and he's got to find those subs. Well, they're not going to leave their good builders that feed their family year round by getting one Cornerstone house after another to go do
a one-off
or a two-off when he's getting started. The only way he can lure those subcontractors away is by paying them more. Because we get good pricing on labor because we feed those guys' family. They know they're going to have Cornerstone houses all the time. Now there might be some 2 or 3 weeks in there where we have a gap where one house isn't ready, or we just don't have anything for them right there at that moment. But most of the time our guys are going from one Cornerstone house to the next. But those subs that work for multiple builders will fill in those gaps by going and doing some work for another builder that they work for, and so on and so forth. So that's the hard part for a new guy getting in, is finding the good subs. Okay, it's easy to find cheap subs, but you don't know what kind of work you're going to get.
Gotcha.
So it takes a lot. I mean, it took years for Tim and I to go through some bad subs to find the good subs. So that's the hard part.
Yeah. What do you think currently separates the homes that you guys are building versus some of these other builders that you've mentioned?
Well, I think what separates us is that we build obviously we build a good quality home. That's kind of first and foremost. So do a lot of other builders. Customer service, our ability to walk through the process with our clients. We have my daughter-in-law works for us, Jordan. She's what I call our client specialist. She is the person that walks our clients through helping them make their selections. She's the one that makes the appointments with our vendors and any subcontractors, electricians, plumbers. She meets them at the job site, walks through with them. That way if there's any, they want to add a plug here, a charging station there, or a recess light here, whatever they and then helping them pick their flooring, their cabinetry. She goes to all those appointments. She makes those appointments, goes to those appointments, and she helps walk them through that process. She helps them hopefully stay on budget.
Yeah.
She knows what the budget is for each specific line item that they're making their selections on, whether it be appliances, flooring, cabinetry, and so she if they pick some stuff that's going to put them a little over budget, she tells them, hey, this is where we're sitting right now. You're going to be a little over budget. We can, go back in and choose something else that's going to put you back more on budget or even a little under budget. So that's very important, is to have somebody like that. That's what I felt like, Tim and I, this is one of the things we argued about. I wouldn't say argued over, but we didn't see eye to eye on is he thought we needed to hire a project manager. I thought we needed a client specialist. I thought that was more important than a project manager because I'd always been the project manager. Tim handles all the scheduling and talking to the clients in the beginning. I'm the one that helps them if they need help designing their floor plan, that kind of thing. And then I'm the one that does the cost estimate, puts the cost estimate together. And I was eyes on the job. And then I do the administrative office work. I write the checks, do all the draws, all that stuff, every week for our subcontractors, and send in the draws into the clients and to the banks for approval, and then writing the checks for the subcontractors. So that's kind of how Tim and I were working, and I was the eyes on the job, but we were getting so busy I couldn't make it to every job site. Yeah. Every day. I mean, when you've got 20 houses going all at one time, I can't make 20 houses in a day. And
especially if they're not all in town.
Yeah, especially if they're not all in town. And so we really needed some help in that area. But I also felt like our clients were lost and in the wind going and making their selections. Again, it goes back to we do this all day, every day. They do not. Right. They don't know, if their lighting budget's a good budget or a low budget or a high budget or a medium budget. They don't, and when they go to these vendors, they're looking at books that don't have pricing in it. Yeah. So inevitably they always, we kept having people come in and their lighting budget's, $2,000 or $3,000 higher than what we gave them. And they're like, well, why are we over budget? Well, you picked $1,000 ceiling fan, right. or a $1,000 dining chandelier. Yeah. Well, they don't know. So, that's what really made it hard for clients. I felt like they were just out there in the wind. They didn't have any help. We were just basically telling them, go here, talk to this person. Now, our vendors had people that would help them. Yeah. But not, they work for that company. So if my clients go over budget, they're like, oh, okay,
What a shame.
What a shame. Yeah. That's more money for us.
My commission check is going to be a little bit better.
Exactly. So having, Jordan as our client specialist that can say, oh, we're going to be a little over budget. We can, if you're willing to do that, we can do that. If not, So, that, I thought that was the more important. But yeah, I will say I won that argument.
I mean, she's there.
But, Jordan came with experience. She was finishing her school in Denton, and she was, about a year away from graduating, and she had been working for a big builder in Hazlet, and she had experience dealing with clients and meeting with clients, doing their walkthroughs, and she was in the sales department for the big builders that you see a lot of in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that have sales homes where you walk in and they don't have realtors, they have salespeople. Oh, wow. That you walk in, you talk to a salesperson, they go show you houses, you buy one of their houses. That's kind of how it works out there. We don't have that here because nobody's really that big. There might be a couple that are close to being that big, but we don't really have that here. So most of us are independent home builders. Yeah. And so that I think that kind of separates us from a lot of builders. Yeah. And we do have it. We didn't end up hiring a project manager that I still go out and I still go visit job sites. But he's more of our eyes on the job than I am. Yeah. So awesome. My time is better spent meeting with clients, doing cost estimates, and keeping those houses going. Yeah. So
So kind of just a few wrap-up kind of questions.
Sure.
So just like, what is something that you've been especially proud of that you guys have been able to do over the years?
Ooh, I think one of the, building the house for, like you and I talked about early before we started this, was my friend Mike Burns, that we were blessed with the opportunity to build a free home for a wounded veteran through the Texas Sentinel Foundation. And it was really cool to be a part of that. Not even the fact that I got a really good friend out of it, out of that family. I mean, Robin and Mike and their kids, we've been very good friends since then. But seeing Abilene and some of the vendors and subcontractors and realtors come together to either donate their services, donate their materials, or do the fundraising to help offset those shortages, those cost shortages to build their house, it was pretty cool and pretty special to be a part of. That's where you're part of a good community that comes together, and you've got subcontractors that are willing to donate their time and their services to build a house like that. Vendors that are willing to donate their materials to do that, and then the realtors and Abilene community that came together to come to the fundraisers and put on the fundraisers to help raise money to cover the gaps in that and build a free house for somebody that served our country and made it and took had a pretty heavy sacrifice, and losing his leg from injuries in combat. So that was pretty special. I really enjoyed that. I thank God every day that I got to meet Mike and Robin and their kids and have a special friendship through that. So I don't see him near enough as I like to these days.
Sure.
But he's busy. He's busy doing helping other veterans. I've been in the car with him, going to a hunting trip up in Panhandle, and he's talking to another veteran that's struggling, and struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts, and just his passion for helping other veterans that are struggling. So he's a pretty cool dude.
That's awesome. What is something that you are personally working on right now? It can be personal, it can be business, just something that you're kind of focused on improving, getting better.
Well, kind of one special project that we're working on right now, and it's not a very big thing. It's not a very big. So we're working on a high performance home for a client right now. And
like it's the fastest home on the block?
No. No. So a high performance home is a very airtight, watertight, and insect tight house. And so it's not something we do a lot of around here because it costs more money to do it.
Sure.
I see some builders that use the zip board system. It's the green boards that you see up. Probably 90% of your builders that you see around here are going to use OSB with a Tyvek, moisture barrier around the house. That's what you're going to see. That's just industry standard. And so that's what you see a lot of. But there's some builders down in the Austin and Austin area, South Texas, that are doing a lot of this high performance home building, where it's zip system on the outside, tape, really creating an airtight, moisture tight, and therefore if it's moisture and dust and airtight, it's bug tight. It just takes a a little bit, well, I'm not a little bit, a lot more different kind of material in the beginning in the framing process. Everything after that is kind of the same, but getting that that envelope, that airtight, watertight, vapor tight envelope around the house is, so it's pretty cool getting to learn that. I've watched a lot of videos of Matt Reisinger down in the Austin area. He builds a lot. He's very well known. He does, podcasts and all kinds of stuff about how he builds his houses down there. And of course, they're high-end homes. I mean, They're very high-end homes because it is an extra cost to do something like that. But yeah, it's pretty cool getting to learn that process and how that works. Taping and flashing and liquid flashing all the little gaps and air gaps and everything that most people don't realize they have in their house. I mean, we live in West Texas where it's be 105 degrees one day and 30 degrees the next day.
Right.
So
or the same day.
Or the same day. And then we get windy days like today where it's okay to have those air gaps because sometimes your house needs to breathe. Especially when we go from extreme cold to extreme heat. But the high performance home, because you're able to shut off those three things out of the house, your energy costs, you can save. You're going to spend you're going to spend some more money in the beginning, but your energy costs are going to recoup that cost. Because I don't have to use I don't have to put as big a air conditioning unit in. Because of what we're doing on the outside, the insulation works as it should be, as it's intended. The foam insulation on the inside is an actual, R20.
Gotcha.
Okay. It may say it's R20 when we put it in a normal house, but because there is airflow in and out between the barriers of the outside of the house, the brick veneer, the normal Tyvek or vapor barrier, and the OSB, there's still air moving in and out of those things. And so the insulation is not a true R20 value, but because what we do on the outside,
Interesting.
It makes that, and so therefore I can, you can put a smaller, heating and air unit in there, so it's gonna save you costs. That heating and air unit, will constantly be, replacing the air, and so it runs instead of turning off and on, off and on, off and on all day. It just kind of goes at a steady hum, and then it might kick up a little bit to do an air replacement and then come back down, and then because it's running all the time at a low level, it's gonna need less maintenance over time. Instead of those parts having to work hard to ramp up, turn it on, get it up, and then shut back down. It's harder on the heating and air unit. Electricity is going to be, so it's not running most of your electricity comes from your heating and air unit turning off and on, off and on, off and on all day.
Yeah.
Only problem is most people can't afford, a high performance home.
Yeah.
So the average home builder can't afford that.
Yeah.
So yes, that's going to be kind of a special project we're working on right now.
That's awesome.
So I'm looking forward to learning it, and getting more. It's in frame up stage right now, so we're going through. It's a slow process, and we're not moving as fast as we normally do on a home build, but it's a pretty interesting, good learning experience. I'm looking forward to finishing this one out and seeing how it goes.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we can end it there. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking, man.